Let's move on to our second manager today. We're going to talk about Tony Mowbray at Blackburn. And the reason we're going to talk about Tony Mowbray is because it's been a really, really topsy-turvy week for him and everyone associated with Blackburn Rovers. On Wednesday night, they were 2-0 down at the time, had a man sent off and ended up losing 7-0 at home to Fulham. A very embarrassing defeat. Now, often following results like that, it tends to go one way or the other. And Mike, this very much went one way. Blackburn bouncing back against Sheffield United at home, falling a goal behind. A young side could easily have just fallen apart again. You know, we could be looking at a team who in the last 7 days have got a goal difference of -11 here, but they didn't. They battled back, they turned things around, and they won 3-1. And for all of the criticism from Blackburn fans that Tony Mowbray gets at times, and whether you think that's fair or unfair, you've got to hand it to him.
Yeah, well, that's it. It was, remarkable to turn around in such a short space of time. But, you know, I don't think Mowbray knew himself what he was going to get this weekend. It's a very unfamiliar position for him to have one of his teams get walloped in such a fashion. You know, he didn't really know what to do himself because it was a new scenario he'd never really found himself in before. And he didn't know what to expect from his players. All he knew was that he is proud of his players and the work that he put in, day out on the training ground. And I think he just hoped that, you know, there's nothing to not like about this squad of players that I've got here. They're all willing. They're all, you know, he wasn't really sure what was going to manifest mentally on the back of that result. So, you know, to go 1-0 down, he talked about, he said, funnily enough, in the post-match interview as well, that the one thing I said to the players before we go out is just, you know, don't, you know, give yourselves a chance in the game. Don't concede a silly goal early. We did it last season against Reading when they were in the top six. You know, West Brom scored within 60 seconds at Ewood Park this season. Fulham scored within a couple of minutes, you know, the other night. And then within 2 minutes, the 1-0 down again at home to Sheffield United. So, but this is it. I don't think Mowbray necessarily knows what he's going to get all the time from his players, but all he can control from his perspective is that they're doing good work day in, day out on the training ground. And obviously it's come through for them here. And I think they're in a good place as a club. But I think Mowbray's right in saying it's just a freak result. It happens, you know. Barcelona got beat 7-8-2 with Lionel Messi in the team once. You know, this can happen in football. And it's just happened to us. We've just got to get on with it. We know that the work we're doing day to day is good work.
Do these results tend to happen more to managers like Mowbray, who are very much sticklers for a particular style? Because I think one or two comments that I saw on social media suggested that as opposed to tightening up when you're 2-0 down and a man down and saying, right, we'll take the 2-0 defeat. As long as you don't get hit for too many more, we're fine. Blackburn continue playing. Blackburn continue to try and have a go at Fulham, try to fight their way back into the game. And that's very much a Tony Mowbray aspect, isn't it? You know, he wants this side to play good football. They always battle. They never give up. But they always want to keep it on the ground and they always want to play some nice stuff. And I guess, you know, one of those where if he'd been a more pragmatic manager who was willing to just sit back and say, right, 2 banks of 4, let's just keep it as it is, stop Fulham scoring again. Do you think we would have seen a very different outcome?
On that one occasion, quite possibly. And I think it is true to Tony Mowbray's type that they did approach it that way, 10 men down. But then he, like I say, he's never really been stung in this fashion before. So who's to say he was wrong to do that, you know? He's probably found himself 2-0 down with 10 men or similar sorts of circumstances 2 dozen times how long his career's been. And yet this has never happened to him before, you know, so the bravery, the courage in possession has never really backfired on him in this fashion. So it's a new experience. But I think this is it with Tony Mowbray is that, you know, he doesn't necessarily know, he doesn't necessarily simulate all the possibilities in his mind. He doesn't think of all the different ways it can go. It's just the right way or a wrong way to go about doing the job. And, you know, he just likes his players to get the ball down, express themselves and play the football, regardless of the circumstances. And, you know, by and large, it never really backfires in the fashion that it did last week.
You take a snapshot of what you see on social media, and this is always a hugely dangerous game, obviously. But a lot of Blackburn fans are unhappy with Mowbray. Now, I'm going to sort of paraphrase what Ali Maxwell from Not the Top 20 podcast said. He basically said that, okay, the fans might be dissatisfied, particularly with the away performances this season, but when you're a club who don't have a particularly big budget, who are working with a lot of younger players, particularly ones that are homegrown, you surely want a manager like Mowbray who will keep you playing a very aesthetically pleasing style and keep you in the mid-table to upper mid-table reach of, in the Championship, which is no mean feat given how competitive it is. And, who are you going to bring in who's going to do a similar job? Mowbray seems to be doing absolutely fine. But obviously, talking as non-Blackburn fans, it can be easy to say. But what's your take on this, Mike?
Yeah, I think you agree with Ali there. We're coming through the other side now of when we did the last podcast on Mowbray last season. I thought he was reaching the end of his time at Blackburn because he looked a bit depressed about football without fans in the stadium, not being able to mix with people on the circuit between matches. And it was just very lifeless. And he looked like he was possibly, his passion for it was possibly on the wane. Now I believe they're coming through the other side. You look at he's in the top 10 longest serving managers in the country now. You look at the other clubs that have got, managers in that top 10, Gareth Ainsworth, John Coleman, Paul Warne. It's clubs that with managers that have gone on to build second cycles. And I think Blackburn are at that point now. They've come through a crossroads where, not last season, but the season before, Mowbray turned round and said, towards the end of the season, I need to speak to the owners of the club. I need to know where this club is going. Are we going to invest and do we want to get into the Premier League? Or did he just want me to develop young talent? Because I'm happy to do either, but I need to know where I stand. I need to know where I'm going with this. Now, that didn't go public. Clearly, they've gone down the let's sell Adam Armstrong for 15 million and invest in youth route. And that's what he's doing. And he's got a young squad. And he's up there again, 7th in the table. And they're doing well. They're doing, they're playing good football. It is pleasing to watch. And they're back in the top half of the table. Now, when I talk about cycles, when I talk about a second cycle, I like to try to frame managers as 4-year cycles. And you have like a spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Last year was clearly the winter for Blackburn and for Mowbray in that job because he wasn't enjoying it. He clearly wasn't enjoying the role. And now it feels like they're coming through the other side and beginning to see. And second cycles, by and large, are better than first cycles because the manager's got 4 years of experience in the job under his belt. What John Coleman does at Accrington doesn't happen by accident. It happens in second and third cycles. How good Rotherham are now compared to what they've been, even in previous promotion campaigns. This is a manager that's really got the job by the short and curlies and knows exactly what he's doing in any situation. Knows his own club inside out, knows his limitations, knows how far he can push things. Mowbray's now entering that second cycle with a really exciting young squad. Lots of young players being generated through it. I think this is beginning to, from me a year ago, thinking this is possibly the end of Mowbray now. I think we're now going into it. We're now progressing into what could be. I want to see how this goes now because this is beginning to get exciting again.
And I guess as well, you got to be careful what you wish for sometimes as well, because if you look at the list of available managers, it can be quite a depressing read. So, if you are going to sack someone of Tony Mowbray's stature, and, let's hope they don't, and I'm sure they won't, especially after that victory on Saturday, but you've got to have someone in mind to replace them. Another thing as well, you talk about his passion maybe being reignited this season. Has that almost certainly been helped by the home fans being back in? Because that home form this season is, bar the only two sides they've lost to, West Brom and Fulham, fair enough. The rest of the games, they've been pretty incredible, haven't they? Particularly from a goal-scoring stance as well.
Yeah, I think the type of football he likes to play probably feeds off the energy of the fans, and I think it's a two-way street. When stadiums are empty, you play a certain brand of football, and you kind of wonder what's the point sometimes. To have these principles, it just kind of feels like all about results because you're not satisfying an audience as such. You're going out there to do a job. It feels like you're just doing a job. It's cold and clinical. And it's what does it say on the scoreline at the end of the game? Whereas I think now being able to play the type of football that Mowbray wants to play is more of an experience. And when the fans are sharing that experience, and when you're having more of the ball in home games, and I think it one feeds into the other, and I think it does appear to be better for them.
So going forward, then it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because 2 of the 3 players who scored on Saturday are on loan. And he has done quite well with Premier League loan stars last season and particularly this season so far. but it seems like the owners are not particularly willing to invest. They've got the 15 million for Adam Armstrong. It doesn't feel like Tony Mowbray is going to be given a big war chest in January. It doesn't feel like Blackburn are going to make a wow signing on a permanent basis anytime soon. So developing young players is great, and obviously bringing into the side, and it's brilliant for everyone to watch. But do you think that means that might be at the expense of promotion anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, Blackburn are not a club that I expect to get promotion anytime soon. I think the height of it basically is they've been knocking on the door for the top six in a few seasons while he's been there. It's at least until 2/3 of the way through the season. At some point, they've always looked in the second half of a season capable of breaking into the top six, but never quite had. I don't think he necessarily manages the expectation side of it very well. He possibly pushes a bit too much or doesn't understand when his players are feeling the pressure. There was this thing a couple of seasons ago where whenever Blackburn had an opportunity to break into the top six with a result, if teams have played before or so on, that they just froze on those occasions. And I think it was, when it becomes very outcome focused, Mowbray does appear to be more of a process manager. It's about enjoying your football. But then when it's suddenly an occasion sets up and it's about getting the result, then that this is where there's a bit of discomfort there. I think as a club, I think it's just about trying to get into that top six or being in and around that top six and maybe just have a shot at the playoffs one year and see how it goes. I don't think Blackburn, given the level of investment in the budget, should be expecting top half necessarily. So just to be in and around that top half and have one eye on the playoffs is exciting enough, because we have seen with several other clubs that there's a parallel storyline that's nowhere near as much fun, and that's Blackburn could quickly become one of those clubs. And I think the future is, you talk about loan signings coming into Ewood Park this season. I think where Blackburn possibly needs to have to look as a club is similar to what Preston did a few years ago and buy from League One and League Two. I think Mowbray can spot talent. If you give him enough money to pay just slightly above the going rate for a good League One, League Two player, he'll source you them players that you then might be able to sell on for more or get an unlikely promotion charge out of that team. I think there's potential in this next cycle for Blackburn if they stick with Mowbray now. But it's not about demanding promotion. It's not about focusing too much on results. As long as the football's decent and as long as you're in that top half of the table, and the idea of getting into that top six and finishing a season in the top six isn't too far fetched, then I personally think that should be enough at this moment in time.
And finally, do you think that Tony Mowbray will be making certain demands as well of the owners? Will he be saying like, look, the vultures are going to be circling for Ben Brereton Diaz in January and certainly next summer if he continues this good form? If you sell him, if we're forced to sell him, I want an X amount of that money back to strengthen my squad. Do you think that's how he tends to negotiate?
No, this is possibly the issue as well. And Mowbray's one of the first to admit this. He hates negotiating. He hates talking to agents. He hates negotiating deals. He hates everything that goes in and around transfers. He just likes working with players on the training ground. He doesn't like football on a business executive level. He doesn't really understand that side of the game. Doesn't want to understand it. It's very much a demon state for him. It kind of needs. You almost feel like put the right CEO in place alongside Tony Mowbray and they're on the same page and they've got each other's backs, and not a situation where Mowbray feels like, am I being, going in above my head here, and am I being... If you could find that nice balance between Mowbray and somebody who is good at at that executive side of the game and they both trust each other implicitly, then I think really good things could happen. But when it comes to negotiations, when it comes to dealing with agents and all that side of the game, that's, what he would say the suits get involved in, it's just not Mowbray. And he's not him to demand, he was quite passive in the way that he dealt with Venky's and the owners when talking about being at this crossroads. Do you want to get the Premier League? Do you want to invest? Or do you want to just develop youth? I'm easy either way. And that's kind of how he is. He's easy either way. So he's kind of a bit of a dream for the owners in that regard. That, you look at the owners and the club, they've put so much money into the club. They're not prepared to invest to get into the Premier League, but you can just be ticking along quite nicely and generating money through transfers from time to time. I mean, it's a wonderful position for them to be in with Mowbray, but I don't think Mowbray's necessarily the sort of manager that's going to challenge them for more, and that might be the root of some of the discontent among Blackburn fans, why they can't see it necessarily going on to this next level.